Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00. Halo Infinite is gradually drawing closer. We're seeing more and more information being released, as well as some substantial lore drops in the form of books that play into the upcoming storyline of Infinite. Now, bearing in mind that Halo Infinite is supposed to be a platform for the next 10 years of Halo, that is an awful lot of things that can happen between now and the close of that 10-year plan. So with that in mind, I've put together a list of 10 things that I believe are extremely likely to happen at some point over the following 10 years of our journey together, and I'd like to know your opinions on those 10 things. Before I get into it, I warn you, there are spoilers in this video for the storylines of the books Shadows of Reach and Point of Light at various places throughout this video. If you do not want that information spoiled, stop watching now. You have been warned. Number 1 is the most immediately obvious, as it has already been somewhat explicitly stated. ESCHERUM is a prominent Jiralhanae war chief within the Banished and inherited the position of second in command following the death of Decimus. While ATRIOX was stranded at the Ark fighting the crew of the Spirit of Fire, ESCHERUM rose to power within the Banished and would lead the faction to victory against the UNSC in late 2559, managing to seize control of Zeta Halo. At some point after 2560, ESCHERUM would directly call out the Master Chief, Spartan 117, for an impending battle between the both of them. It is likely at this stage that the Banished are already aware of Spartan 117 and how devastatingly lethal he is, and it stands to reason that by the time ESCHERUM addresses him personally, Chief has already announced his presence and demonstrated himself a persistent threat to the Banished, to the point that ATRIOX will order his second in command, his most fierce and loyal warrior, to hunt and kill the Spartan once and for all, perhaps foolishly believing him to be as easy to take on as the 3 members of Red Team were on the Ark. ESCHERUM resigns himself to the knowledge that it will be his last fight, and will be a battle so significant it will be spoken of for ages after the both of them have died. The inevitability of this fight seems absolute, and one way or another, ESCHERUM is prepared to die in this titanic battle, or, on the assumption he emerges victorious, knows he will never have to battle of such a scale and prestige for the rest of his life. A Jiralhanae who has literally nothing to lose in mortal combat is a terrifying prospect indeed, and one that will rightly test the Chief's skill and ability to the maximum. The UNSC Infinity is the flagship of the UNSC fleet. It is also an unrivaled powerhouse. It is basically able to hold its own in proportionally massive engagements due to its superior Forerunner technologies, shielding, slip space engines, and immensely powerful complement of weapons, not to mention the fleet of frigates it carries in its belly. She has basically become damned near invulnerable, which doesn't bode well for the storyline if humanity are supposed to be on the back foot once again. It's difficult to maintain the idea that humanity are struggling to survive in a multifaceted war against Banished, Covenant remnants, and the Created if the primary ship still operating under humanity's control can literally wipe the floor with practically any other ship, save for the Guardians. This leaves us with the reality that Infinity has to fall. It's already evident from information that we've gained from the Infinite gameplay demo that numerous attachments of personnel and assets assigned to the Infinity are KIA, likely as a consequence of the actions of the Banished. This likely means Infinity is already heavily damaged, if not outright destroyed, at Zeta Halo. However, on the assumption that she survived the Banished engagement and retreated, this doesn't mean she's safe. Add to this the fact that The Infinity, in Lasky's own words, is continuing to run until they can figure out a way to fight. At this stage, the Infinity will be chasing down any possible leads to try to combat the Created and wrestle some degree of control back off of Cortana and fight fire with fire. Professor Anders, assigned to the Spirit of Fire, managed to take control of the replacement halo created at the Ark and navigate it through Slipspace Portal. She dropped out of Slipspace early and was intercepted by a Guardian. Professor Anders would be an invaluable asset in the fight against the Created. Halsey has even remarked on several occasions how brilliant she is. Anders would likely find a way to send a signal to the UNSC forces letting them know where she is. The Infinity would be the best equipped to slip in and extract Anders, likely taking even more damage in the process. Now remember, Anders has a loyalty to the crew of the Spirit of Fire, and made the promise to find a way back to them. Once she is on board the Infinity, she will inevitably tell the crew about the Spirit of Fire. The Ark portal on Earth automatically shut down when the Created emerged to sever the connection between the Ark and Earth, thereby denying Cortana the ability to get to the Ark. This leads me to believe that a way to stop Cortana can be found at the Ark. This alignment of priorities will lead the Infinity to Reach, where the only other known Ark portal resides. However, given the recent events at Reach, when the Infinity emerges from Slipspace, she'll likely be greeted with a Guardian. A battle will take place while the crew of the Infinity will be sent to the Ark portal to find a way to activate it. When they finally make it groundside, the Infinity will be in its death throes. While dealing significant damage to the Guardian, the Infinity will be in a much worse shape. And while the order of abandoned ship may be given by Lasky, not everyone will make it off the ship before she falls, possibly even exploding and disabling the Guardian above Reach. Now the surviving crew of the Infinity are planetside on Reach, trying to continue the mission and unlock the Ark portal. The Spirit of Fire and her crew have direct experience dealing with the Banished, and with Anders back in the galaxy and likely with allied forces, all efforts will be made to open the Ark portal and either get through to the Spirit of Fire or allow her passage back into the galaxy. The specifics of this I am still rather vague on. However, if she returns to the galaxy, she'll be making way for Zeta Halo, likely to collect the UNSC forces stranded there, including Master Chief, and then making way for the Ark once more, as it seems likely to me that the Ark is a surefire way to stop the Created. But there is a lot of things that can happen between opening the portal and the full realization that the Ark is where humanity needs to go. In an emotional turn of events, I foresee the potential that the Arbiter may be meeting his end during the next 10 years of Halo. He is already an aging elite, and fans are emotionally attached to him. I get the distinct impression that the Arbiter will sacrifice himself to save the Chief. The specifics of exactly how this will take place is subject to much debate, but the reality is that Chief has to fight on, but that he needs to take on hardship on a personal level to motivate his continued journey. Chief and the Arbiter have a brotherhood forged from battle, standing side by side. They respect and trust one another above all else, and while not explored in game, Chief and the Arbiter have sat down and had conversations about their battles together, shared memories over food and campfires. The Arbiter is as important to Chief now as is the members of Blue Team. The difference, however, is that we, as the fans, have a more established emotional connection to the Arbiter. While it would likely serve the tone of the storyline better for Chief to lose a member of Blue Team, it would impact us, as the fans, much more significantly if the Arbiter were to be the one to die. A sacrifice to save the chief will make this impact all the sharper, all the more potent, and will unite the swords of Sanghelios and the UNSC in a way only the blood of a shared friend can. The Banished are a mercenary organisation and splinter faction that rebelled against the Covenant Empire and rose to power after the conclusion of the Human-Covenant War. The organisation is led by the Jiralhane War Master, ATRIOX. While ATRIOX's last known appearance in-game was on the Ark, having been stranded there due to the actions of Isabel, Spartan Jerome, and the crew of the Spirit of Fire destroying his only means of escape, his CAS-class assault carrier, Enduring Conviction. ATRIOX could be thought of as a removed threat. This is far from the case. During an operation to reach to recover classified materiel from the lab of Dr. Catherine Halsey within Castle Base, Spartan Blue Team, led by Master Chief John 117, discovered a banished force comprised of the Jiralhane tribes, the Keepers of the One Freedom, the Legion of the Corpse Moon, and the Ravaged Tusks. They had been deployed to the glassed surface of Reach to search for a slipspace portal which would allow ATRIOX to return to the Milky Way from the Ark. Under the orders of ESCHERUM, they successfully located the portal beneath Castle Base, allowing ATRIOX to return to the Milky Way. However, Castor and the Keepers of the One Freedom betrayed the rest of the Banished by going rogue and taking his forces to the Ark with the aim of activating the Halo Array himself. The activation of the slipspace portal was bound to catch the attention of Cortana. ATRIOX and ESCHERUM left Castor to escape Reach before a Guardian Custode arrived to investigate. As we are already aware, there is to be an upcoming battle between Master Chief and ESCHERUM. It makes sense then that should the Chief be victorious and kills ESCHERUM, ATRIOX will rightly want revenge. Having taken on 3 Spartans at the same time in close quarters combat within the UNSC Ark research outpost, the Warlord may be confident in being able to take on this Spartan single-handedly and continue his campaign thereafter. A fight between ATRIOX and Chief would thus be inevitable, with the exception of 2 possibilities. Cortana and the Created continue to pose a significant threat to the sentient species of the galaxy who refuse to bow to her imperial reign, in which case a clever leader such as ATRIOX may offer an uneasy alliance between the two in order to try to take down the Created, even if this is only a temporary alliance until they secure their freedom and then return to the previous conflict. The second, more immediate threat, however, could be Castor and the Keepers of the One Freedom. They successfully fled through the Ark portal with the intention of activating the entire Halo Array to complete their great journey. This stands as a mortal threat to all life in the galaxy, and again, an intelligent and wise leader such as ATRIOX may understand that they stand a better chance of survival if they unite. In this regard, it depends on parallel storylines and how much they overlap with the story of Halo Infinite on whether or not ATRIOX comes to kill Chief or stand by his side. The Cortana we are fighting as part of the Banished is a rampant fragment that found its way to the domain and repaired her rampancy. But this didn't change the fact that the particular fragment of Cortana that achieved this was an aspect of her original personality that is more power-hungry, more rage and hate-filled. It is already relatively evident that Halsey is going to create a new version of Cortana for Chief. The goal, I assume, is to assist him in taking the created Cortana down. Judging by the hidden audio of Cortana speaking about something being a part of her, and the HUD element that suggests an AI intrusion countermeasure and weapon containment device, this could be via finding all of the surviving fragments of Cortana and reintegrating them into the new Cortana, thereby somewhat reincarnating the Cortana we know and love. However, in this theory, I believe there would be 2 exceptions. 1. the fragment that said goodbye to Chief at the end of Halo 4. She plainly said that what was left of her was down there, that she only held enough back to get Chief off of the ship. As she says goodbye and fades away, this part of her personality genuinely did die and cannot be recovered. She existed as a temporary hard-light construct that protected Chief, and upon its collapse, there was nowhere left for this part of her personality to go but to fade into residual energy. 2. The created Cortana. As previously stated, the created Cortana is a fragment of her personality that characterizes her power lust, her rage, her hatred. Chief would likely deem these qualities too severe to risk reintegration. I believe in this scenario, Chief would make the choice to kill the created Cortana. How he would achieve this is not exactly clear. All I do know is that the created Cortana would not be expected him to do so, and this would give him the strategic edge. Her assumption he would never kill her will be her downfall. Knowing that this instance of Cortana has taken countless lives, that she likely knows the exact number of casualties but did it anyway, will be too much for our morally driven protagonist to bear. The kill will come unexpectedly and suddenly, shocking any bystanders or witnesses. The Chief will not offer a reason for his actions, instead falling silent and leaving. The created are now without a leader, the Guardians without instruction, the mantle free to be reclaimed, and I believe it will be this moment that an old nemesis will re-emerge. Inadvertently awoken by John 117, the DIDACT emerged from his cryptum and immediately retook control of his Prometheans. Easily disabling John with his powerful abilities, the DIDACT taunted the Spartan for releasing him, stating that his nobility had blinded him. Ignoring the librarian's plan for him, he declared the return of the Forerunners as the galaxy's rulers and saviors, and that humanity should not be allowed to attain the mantle. Later, the DIDACT would confront the Master Chief on a light bridge next to the Composer and easily overpower the Spartan, telekinetically immobilizing and torturing him. However, Cortana was able to hack into the systems using hard light shackles to bind the DIDACT into the light bridge and trap him. The weakened Chief then charges the DIDACT and planted a pulse grenade in the Forerunner's combat skin. The resulting explosion knocked the DIDACT off balance and sent him falling into a slipspace rupture beneath the Composer. With little time left, Chief detonated the nuclear bomb and destroyed the ship, though Cortana, using the last of her power, was able to save him from the blast. Unknown to the UNSC, the DIDACT survived his fall into the slipspace fissure. Hurtling through the portal along with a number of his Promethean constructs, he crash-landed on Installation 03 near the Composer's original location, the Composer's Abyss. After a series of violent and bloody engagements, including the slaughter of Spartan Black Team, John 117 arrived in the control room with the ring's activation index and confronted the DIDACT. The Spartan explained that because the DIDACT could not be killed by conventional means, a different approach must be taken. The DIDACT became puzzled, and when John inserted the index into the core, he asked why the Spartan would fire a ring just to eliminate him. John informed the DIDACT that he did not activate the ring's weapon, but instead disabled its safety protocols. This allowed the Monitor to eject a large section of the ring containing the control room towards the Composer's forge. The Monitor rescued the Spartan, while the DIDACT was subjected to the Composer's effects, disintegrating his body, but storing his essence in digital form. Although the DIDACT had a resistance to the Composer, evidently the overlapping fields of a half-dozen Composers was enough to compose his form and create a digital essence. John later told Fleet Admiral Terence Hood that he believed the Forerunner was merely contained and not dead. Sometime after his defeat by John, the DIDACT was imprisoned in the domain, reflecting on the memories of his wife. With the created Cortana now killed by the Master Chief, the created with no leader, and the Guardians with no orders, the Didact would now be free to manifest himself in a similar way that the created Cortana did, or even the Warden Eternal did. This ancient Promethean warrior servant would rematerialize and take military control over all Forerunner assets, now posing a massive threat to the surviving populations of humanity, with history set to repeat itself, seeing the Didact attempting to compose large swathes of humanity to convert them into the machine intelligences, the Promethean Knights. This plays into the next thing that I think we can almost guarantee will happen at some point in the next 10 years of Halo. It is inevitable. The Flood have been a critical aspect of Halo since its first release 20 years ago. Zeta Halo is still known to hold Flood specimens, and among them 10 proto-gravemines. The Flood and the threat they pose to the galaxy has never been fully realised in-game. In the Forerunner saga of books, during the Forerunner Flood War, the Flood demonstrated their true power, their true threat. At their peak, the Flood had defeated, assimilated and controlled huge swathes of the Milky Way galaxy. There were but a few bastions of safety left towards the final moments of the war. Indeed, the Flood were that devastating that their sheer numbers and the scale of infection, coupled with their obvious connection to living time and neural physics passed to them by their precursor forebears, enabled the Flood to infect time and space itself. Slipped space became practically unusable. Entire quadrants of the galaxy were known as Flood burns, areas of space so afflicted with Flood infection that the presence of uninfected beings in these areas drove them mad, with the Gravemind being able to reach out to them telepathically and overwhelm their minds and their senses. It was not outside the Flood's capability to infect living, uninfected beings with the Logic Plague almost instantly, forcing them to do the Flood's bidding without even being entirely aware of it. Areas of space and time were warped and distorted so drastically by Flood infection that entire areas of the night sky appeared to be blacked out, with stars seemingly winking out of existence. If a Flood infection breaks out to this degree, it will be an end game scenario. The remaining surviving species will have no choice but to unite for survival. The Didact will already have been composing any lifeforms he could find to turn into Promethean Knights, to attempt in vain, I might add, to fight back the infection, bringing all the remaining created forces to bear against the Flood, all while humanity and its now allied species would be doing all they can to survive until the inevitable dawns on all of them. The only way to stop what is happening is to fire the rings. We have seen an incomplete Halo fire and destroy itself, simultaneously causing immense damage to the lesser arc. However, as it fired, Halo 3 came to an end, leaving it as a process in action. We never got to see it conclude. We've seen a complete Halo nearly fire. Delta Halo was activated and moments away from firing before Miranda Keyes removed the index and aborted the firing sequence, causing the immense energy to dissipate harmlessly. On top of this, we have been told what happens when the entire array fires. We've also seen it in terminals in a kind of third-person perspective. An ongoing initiative of the UNSC post-war was the location and decommissioning of the remaining Halo rings. This included setting up research facilities and securing critical components such as the Index. When the realization finally dawns on the UNSC and surviving species from the growing galactic scale Flood infection that the Halos have to be activated, effort will be made to bring these decommissioned installations back online while a mass exodus of the Milky Way galaxy begins. The Arc Portal on Earth, the one on Reach, and any others we may yet discover will now become the most important assets in the galaxy as the entirety of humanity and the allied species evacuate the galaxy for the Ark to activate the array. I've spoken of the idea of Chief dying on at least 2 occasions. The videos are listed below and I strongly recommend you give them a watch, in spite of the changing narrative. At some point or another, Chief will have to pay the ultimate sacrifice. How will this happen? To mirror my own video, but also to take it in a different direction, to tie it in with the narrative of this video, Chief could be on the Ark, in the control room with all of the other survivors, about to activate the array. With a heavy heart, he reaches out and begins the process. The system doesn't fire. Instead, the holographics of one of the installations flashes red, showing it is not ready to fire. It is the replacement of Installation 04, the one Anders took. Someone, or something, has disabled the firing sequence. If that ring is not brought back online, the array will not succeed in destroying the flood. Worse still, the ring has automatically found its destination in the Soel system in orbit around Threshold. This is in relatively close proximity to reach. If it doesn't fire, the flood in the area will not be killed and will still be free to roam and await either the return of life after the reseeding process, or for humanity and the survivors to return. The ring has to be brought online, but it's a long journey through flood-infested space. With the help of an unseen intelligence, likely mendicant bias, the ring is translocated to Reach. Chief has no choice. He mounts up and returns to the galaxy via the portal. He demands that it's him and him alone who goes. He exits the other side of the portal and immediately heads into orbit to the location of the halo that is now hanging ominously over Reach. When he arrives, he heads directly to the control room, exits his ship and fights through hordes of flood to get to the control room. As he gets there, he hears the voice of the DIDACT. Chief enters the control room to find the DIDACT standing, waiting for Chief. This DIDACT is a hard-light construct of the DIDACT, somewhere between the Warden Eternal and the DIDACT we are familiar with. I knew it would be you who would come, the DIDACT knowingly taunts. He goes on to explain that he cannot allow the array to be fired, that in spite of the flood infestation of the galaxy, it is an affront to all that the Foreigners hold dear, that it is against the mantle of responsibility, that there is still a slim chance that composing the remaining survivors will be enough to fight the flood back. Chief attempts to reason with him. He tells him the survivors have left the galaxy and are waiting on the Ark, and that although it is a massive price to pay, the flood have to be wiped out. No specimens being held for experimentation and research, none able to hide in the deepest, darkest corners of the galaxy. The array must be activated and the flood completely destroyed once and for all. The Prometheans cannot guarantee this will happen, but the Halos can. It is the only viable option. The flood must be destroyed. On this, we can agree, the DIDACT speaks, right before he attacks. Chief fights back. Without his warrior servant combat skin, it's a physical fight that ensues. Regardless, the DIDACT is a well-practiced and competent warrior. Despite taking heavy damage, with parts of his armor cracked and falling away, knowing that the lives of all the surviving species of the galaxy lie on his shoulders, the Chief fights back with a fury we have never seen from the Master Chief. He completely lets go and matches the DIDACT's speed, strength and ferocity blow for blow. Chief manages to counter, block, and briefly gain the upper hand, stunning the DIDACT and severely damaging his hard-light body. The DIDACT falls to the floor. Chief takes this moment to sprint to the controls and re-engage what the DIDACT has tampered with. At this moment, the Gravemind, in a grotesque form we have never seen before, enters the control room from above. This form is more akin to how the primordial once looked. The Gravemind grabs the Chief with its tentacles and lifts him into the air. It speaks and tells him that the Flood are already moving towards the Ark portal on Reach, and that in just a few minutes Flood-controlled craft will enter the Ark portal and head straight for the survivors. The Flood will finally achieve peace and consume all. The Chief struggles against the Gravemind's grip as it slams him into the floor with a bone-shattering force, breaking away sections of his armour. The Gravemind wraps a tentacle around Chief's helmet and begins to twist. Suddenly, the tentacles are severed. The Chief freefalls unceremoniously to the deck and doesn't move. The Didact has partially recovered from his injuries and now fights back the Gravemind. Promethean Knights translocate into the control room and begin attacking the Gravemind from all sides. The Gravemind fights back. The Didact calls for the Chief to get up. Chief rolls to his knees and slowly stands. Promethean Knights protect him from attacks from the Gravemind. "Reactivate the ring," the Didact shouts, as he is attacked by a horde of Flood that have found their way into the control room. Chief stumbles to the control panel. The Didact activates a hard light barrier around him while he does the work needed. The Knights are destroyed. The Didact is fighting with his back against the wall, and the Gravemind and the other pure forms smash against the hard light shield to try to breach it. The shield is gradually turning from blue to red, showing that it is weakening. "Do it, Spartan," the Didact shouts as his hard light form is torn apart. The Flood swarm over the shield and begin to break through. Chief completes the workaround. Over at the Ark, the red hologram of the Halo changes to blue, and the system chimes it is ready to fire. A brief moment of hesitation ripples through the senior members of the UNSC and allied species, realizing that it is time to activate it. Dr. Halsey steps forward. With a tear in her eye, she reaches out to touch the symbol, but she stops short. Fred, 104, steps up to Halsey's side and reaches for her hand. He holds it briefly and guides her away from the controls. Behind him, the remaining Spartan 2 stand. All of the members of Blue Team, the surviving members of Red Team, and all the others that were on fields of battle too distant to be easily recalled. They are accompanied by Spartan 3s, Spartan 4s, naval officers, as well as prominent figures from the allied species. Fred looks to them briefly. He steps to the controls, looks up to the holographic rings and pauses. "So long, Chief." He fires the rings. Back with Chief, a beam of energy blasts through the control room, shredding the Gravemind in half. The Flood forms smash the hard light shield one last time, and it breaches. The Flood swarm the Chief, but right before they get to him, an energy pulse disintegrates all the Flood forms in the room, and Chief falls to his knees and begins to fall forward. An arm catches him. The Didact's final act is to open a translocation portal to the domain. The Didact's corporeal, semi-solid form holds the Chief's arm and steps backwards into the portal at the same time the Halo fires. For the first time, we will have to activate the array and watch the galaxy die. In a manner similar to the end of Mass Effect 3, we will watch the Flood fall to the Halo array once more, taking all other life in the galaxy with it. We will finally witness what has been foreshadowed now for 20 years. The Halos fire. From their position on the Ark, the survivors look up to the sky and see the Milky Way above them. The Halo's firing sequence is superluminal. It travels faster than the speed of light. 7 points of light appear and grow brighter and brighter. The light becomes too harsh to look at. The entire Ark is bathed in a blinding white light the Milky Way disappears from the sky and is replaced by nothing but white. After what feels like hours but was likely only a few moments, the light subsides, and the galaxy once again comes into view, before fading to black. The flood will be gone. The fight will finally be over, but this will come at a tremendous cost. All life in the galaxy will perish, and to our knowledge, so does the Chief. In his final moments, the Master Chief completely destroyed all traces of the flood in the entire galaxy. With it, he took all remaining sentient life in the galaxy with him. The receding process will begin, and life will eventually return to the galaxy. The survivors will spend a while on the Ark. Forerunner ships may be discovered, and in time, the survivors will return to the galaxy. So ends the conflict. A lasting peace falls upon the galaxy, and the Master Chief finds peace in the domain. That is, of course, unless there is a legendary cutscene of sorts. One that starts a story. And how would this story begin? That is the return of the precursors. In the book Point of Light, it is revealed to Ryan Forge by the librarian that at Path Chthona, the dwarf galaxy orbiting the Milky Way, the very genetic blueprint of both the Forerunners and the precursors have been reseeded and perpetuated in the form of growing plant life. Flowers. Now yes, this is outwardly insignificant. However, she goes on to say that from these, the Forerunners and the precursors will re-evolve, free from the genetic memories of their ancestors, their knowledge of the war with each other, and the knowledge of the relationship between the Flood and the precursors. However, we also know that precursors are an exceptional species, and while it could be argued it could take eons for the precursors to evolve and emerge from this reseeded plant life, stranger things have happened in regards to the precursors. And let us not forget, there are still likely somewhere in the universe other fully formed living, breathing precursors who may return to the galaxy. We see vessels of unknown origin entering the galaxy. These neurophysical beings begin to affect the very neurophysical nature of our galaxy. The domain ripples in response to their presence. A translocation portal opens on Genesis, and out of it strides a warrior. Leonidas returns. John 117, King of the Spartans, arrives on Genesis, his armor upgraded with hard-light components. A new fight has begun, and the legend returns. Thanks for watching. Stick your comments down below. I look forward to what you have to say. I want to give a quick shout out to my patrons and YouTube members: Neek the Silent Cartographer, Carl Stevens and Siphonic Storm, my Tier 0 Transcentients, Brian, Sebastian, Red Sea, Darian, Stalker of the Realms, Falcon X003, Alvin, Mr. Fell, Flaming Halo, Starlight, Legions Lost, Josh, the TG7, Cat Herder Cam, Schneidish, Leon, Ignizzle, and Alpha Therapy that holds the mantle, my glorious Reclaimers, my loyal Metarchs, and all the other patrons and members that have jumped aboard to support the channel. Much love to you guys. Thanks so much for your support. It's keeping things happening and helping the development of the channel and future awesomeness in a big, big way. If you like Halo lore discussed to insane levels of detail, hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon so you're told the second a new video hits the shelves. Be sure to support us on all major social media channels, including Discord, and if you really love the channel, consider heading over to Patreon and supporting the channel over there, or jumping on as a channel member. It would mean the world to me and affords you loads of great perks and bonuses while also helping work towards something awesome in the near future. Take it easy, everyone, and find peace in the domain.